AM 1060 WMEL. The views expressed on the following program are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and are not necessarily those of WMEL staff, management, or advertisers.
This is Joe Steckler, folks, your host for Helping Seniors, the radio arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County, Incorporated. Our website is helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. I recommend that you take a look at it if you haven't done it before. And while I'm talking, think about getting a pencil and paper out, because my guest today is Bill Johnson, elder law attorney. And we're going to talk about some things that we pick up on the National Association of Elder Law Attorney Network, things that seniors really should be more attuned to. I will tell you that the phone number to get in contact with Kay over at the office, our information specialist who can connect you with services, is 473-7770. And our sponsors for the first part of the show include Kindred at Home, formerly the old Gentiva Home Health Care Service. I always kind of bring the old name in so people will know who Kindred is when you call them. It's the largest home health care service in the United States. Eye Institute, Dr. Lee Sheldon, Bill Johnson, elder law attorney, my panelist today. WMEL AM 1060, Woodstock Hospital Systems, Levin Home Care, Atlantic Shores Rehabilitation, Ebony News Today, Wendy Handy from the Dale Sorensen Real Estate, Riverview Senior Resort, Nursing Home Assisted Living Place, and Organized Creative Designs. And that name is a catcher because Organized Creative Designs is actually a lady that is taking her nursing skills and putting them to use in helping senior citizens downsize, move into something smaller or something that's less cluttered, safer for them to be into, creating obstruction-free passageways in your home. And but those are our sponsors for the first part of the show. And the last thing I'll tell you, because sometimes I want people to know that what I'm about to say to you is not always true. I went into my cardiologist last week for an appointment, and a receptionist at the front desk said, "I just listened to your show, Mr. Steckler," and she said, "You know, you're always calm and collected on your radio show. It never appears that you're under any stress." I said, "I'm glad you think that." Bill Johnson, my panelist today, probably has known me longer than most of my other panelists, and he knows I get under a heck of a lot of stress. It sometimes can start off early in the morning and end late at night when you're working with a care system. You know, a lot of you might get frustrated about the national elections and everything, but folks, when you're working with plain old people that are just simply trying to eke out a living, eke out a system where they can care for themselves and their loved ones, and they run into all kinds of obstacles, they call us for help. And most of the times we can help, not always. And the ones we can't, it just breaks my heart sometimes because I know they could be helped if we all worked together better. So the purpose of helping seniors is to inform, to educate, and then connect people with resources. So having said that, welcome, Bill.
Good afternoon, Joe.
Good afternoon, Bill. I titled our show today, The Increasing Cost of Care. And I'd just like for us to talk about that topic for a minute, Bill, before we get into the rest of the show, because you do your seminars, you have all your estate planning things, how about helping our listeners understand the seriousness of what is happening, maybe some things we might be able to do to lessen that cost to ourselves, or at least be better prepared?
Well, healthcare costs keep going up. That's a given, and it usually typically outpaces inflation. So we see increasing healthcare costs that increase at a rate that's greater than inflation, which means most people can't keep up with those increasing costs. I just saw the other day a study where they looked at the cost of nursing home care throughout the United States. I think the lowest they found was, $72,000 somewhere in Ohio. That's $72,000 a year. And the highest was, $148,000 a year in New York City.
I would expect that in New York City.
Yeah. and, the average was somewhere in between there. Can't remember exactly what the average was, but it was more than it's been in the past. It was, I think, somewhere in the order of 78,000, 80,000, something like that.
Well, just think about it. You and I have talked about long-term care insurance on programs for years. Even if somebody has long-term health care insurance, you might get 150, 175 a day, but let's just say round it off 150. That's $4,500 a month. You still might have to come up with another $4,500.
Correct.
So where in the thunder are people finding those kind of... Not everybody's got that kind of money.
Well, just think about if you were paying a nursing home here in Brevard County, they range anywhere from $250 all the way up to over $300 a day. So you could have a bill anywhere from $7,500 to a little over $10,000 a month. That's, on a yearly basis, you're looking at, $72,000 to, $120,000 a year. And that's a considerable amount of money. And, most people don't even make that a year working.
I know.
So, we're talking about retirees who no longer are working. And where are they going to come up with that kind of money to pay those kinds of bills?
And most of those people then go on the state Medicaid.
Yes. Each and every nursing home here in Brevard County has some sort of population that is on Medicaid in their facility.
And Medicaid, as we both just read in an article in AARP, the current Medicaid budget for the state of Florida is $23 billion a year. $23 billion.
Now remember, that includes not just the part of the budget that covers seniors, but it also covers kids and unemployed persons.
Oh, I know that.
Right.
I know that. But the preponderance of the money is for seniors.
I would say a good chunk of it is.
Yeah. But having said it makes no difference if it's seniors, children, or disabled others. It's still $23 billion that the taxpayer has to pay for.
Correct.
So another article I gave Bill, folks, it was in AARP, and I noticed that he was carefully studying this article. It had to do with the fact that 1 out of every 5 people in the United States is a recipient of some form of Medicaid. 1 out of every 5. So that's roughly 60 million people in the United States are receiving some form of Medicaid bill.
And I was going to say, contrast that with those other statistics that came out not too long ago, I think in Money Magazine, where they talked about most Americans do not have 2 months of money in the bank for emergencies.
Right.
They don't even have that. They're living literally paycheck to paycheck. So you imagine you have a big, healthcare event and you lose somebody's salary. You can see very quickly how things snowball into having to have somebody go on Medicaid.
The answer is not in developing more ways to find ways to pay for Medicaid, but somehow, Bill, we've got to bring down the cost of care or do like we used to do years ago where more family members were involved in the care of family members.
Well, we used to have stay-at-home family members who didn't work. And
right.
We changed that over the course of the 70s and 80s. So now that both parents work, there isn't that person at home to take care of the elderly like there used to be. So it makes it much harder to do that kind of model. Not impossible. Some places have done that, and we've seen an increase of households that have 2 and 3 generations living under one roof.
Right. It was in Oregon, I think, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago that they started the program to try to draw down the population of the nursing home, get them from the home back into the community where families were taken care of. I think Oregon was a front runner in starting that. I noticed in the article I gave you in AARP, it was talked about a program in Florida. Help people understand about this managed care program and this business where, and we both have to do some more investigating about this thing with Sunshine.
Yeah, I think to give you a little background, most long-term care policies nowadays do have some sort of clause in them that does allow you to hire a family member to care for somebody in the family. So if I were to get a long-term care policy that would pay, let's say, $150 a day, I could have, my spouse or my kids or, another relative be my primary caregiver, and they could receive payment from the long-term care insurance company. Usually they have to go through some sort of caregiving course to qualify, like a 24-hour or 48-hour course, but they are able to now be paid caregivers under most long-term care policies.
So it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, and there's, because think about it, if you have to have a spouse or a child give up a job to become a caregiver, now we're creating more destitute people. So now you can use those monies from your long-term care policy to pay that family member.
Yeah, but most people reason that say, hey, why should we have to pay them out of state funds or my tax dollars, because that's their family member? Let them take care of it. You can say that until the problem hits home.
Well, yeah, and I think, now that long-term care insurance has that option to pay family members, now we've seen the state, the light bulb went on at the state level, and they're beginning to come up with programs where they can do the same sort of thing, where you can use Medicaid money to maybe keep somebody out of a nursing home, keep them at home, and pay the family members some sort of stipend, per month, nowhere near the dollar figures I was just talking about.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and a very minimal stipend to tide them over and stay at home.
Yeah, so that's exactly the type of thing that we've been talking about here on this radio station. The two of us have been talking about this for years. But it's just recently that they're starting to think more about this. That's what bothers me.
Right, and I think that's because they've seen the private sector take the lead on that, and now all of a sudden, like I said, the light bulb's gone on, and they have decided this may be a very good cost-saving device.
So how does all this tie together with the seminars you put on estate planning and trying to let long-term care, let your correct financial plan, get your financial planner, if you got $100,000 or $100 million, you can do the same thing.
Well, we've talked about that before. Is you got to figure out where you want to have your care, and a lot of times you may not be able to be cared for where you think you're going to get your care. If you're immobile, it may not be possible for us to take care of you at your house because your 100-pound wife isn't going to be able to pick you up and put you in the shower. Or if there's a fire at the house, she's not going to be able to pick you up and get you out of the house. So there can be severe, safety concerns, and it can also be very impractical. And so sometimes we do have to move people out of their houses into different situations. But generally speaking, most people want to be cared for at their house, and so it's setting up something that would allow you to, to do that.
Right.
And the number one way of doing that would either be you have enough money that you're going to pay the bill yourself, or you buy long-term care insurance. Because as you and I know, if you were looking for that kind of service from Medicaid, you're going to be put on a waiting list of 58,000 people.
Exactly right.
So you may not get that choice to stay at home under Medicaid.
So as much as you and I have hammered on this in the past, we talk about it. How in the world, with television shows, radio shows, printed media, hometown news, all this, and you have article after article, you do the seminars at one senior place, you talk about this all the time, yet people still don't pay attention.
And I think a lot of it has to do with having access to the people who have knowledge. And I think you and me both have been trying to spread that wealth of information amongst people. But, most of the people who have assets have access to asset managers. And those asset managers raise these questions with them.
Yeah.
And so if you're one of these people who's living paycheck to paycheck, you're not really ever going to meet or run into an asset manager that's going to make you aware of these options. Or you may think your estate's minimal and you don't need an asset manager. You're just going to have everything invested in CDs and whatnot, and subsequently you don't get that advice from a financial advisor, that you need to look at these kinds of things. And if you're not getting that advice, and then you have a long-term care incident appear, you're going to be caught off guard.
Yeah. And the sad part about that, Bill, is that many people have homes they own outright. And they may be $150,000 or $200,000 or $200,000 homes. They have equity in those homes. But so many of us want to save that equity and pass it on to children or grandchildren. But think about, in the interim, what about all the people that need help or have an incident where they need to pay for something, or they need a roof on their home, and they call the county or they call somebody, expect somebody else to put a roof on their house, when they could in fact real easily go to a reverse mortgage specialist. I'm talking about a good one. I'm not talking about a fly-by-night operation. I'm talking about somebody that knows what they're doing, and they can take a small loan out, get the roof fixed. Yeah, you may have $5,000 less of value that you can pass on 10 years later when you die, but at least you're going to pass on a home to your children that is sellable.
Right, with a good roof.
Yes. Yeah. When you have these seminars, do you talk about things like that?
No, I don't talk about that. Those are mainly financial decisions that people have to make on their own. I'm more involved in what happens to your assets after you die, or how to protect your assets if you have to apply for long-term care.
Okay. There was one thing that I gave Bill as we started the show, and it had to do with, we got a short period of time I want to talk about just a second, and that had to do with the, what was that thing, that Special Needs Trust.
Okay.
We got 4 minutes. Tell people what a Special Needs Trust is and why it's important to understand of executing that kind of trust, or executing any documents you prepare with an attorney.
Generally speaking, a special needs trust is a trust that allows you to put assets in it without disqualifying the beneficiary of those assets from obtaining public benefits.
Such as Medicaid.
So if if you were on Medicaid and you were the victim of a car crash and you got a settlement check,
okay.
If we gave that check to you directly, that would knock you out of getting Medicaid. You would have to spend that settlement check. You'd go broke again, and then you would have to go through the whole process of reapplying and doing that all over again. Whereas if we are allowed to put that asset in a special needs trust, we can put that into a special needs trust. It doesn't count as an asset, and that money can be used to help you without counting as an asset or disqualifying you from receiving benefits.
And the example that I pulled off the National Association of Law Attorney Network stuff that you said to me on a weekly basis, that's how I learned more about this legal stuff, Bill. What did they mean when they said they created a special needs trust, but they didn't formally establish it?
Well, in that particular case you're referring to, they never set up the special needs trust.
Oh, they didn't set it up?
No, they never established it. Obviously, if you want to put the assets in a trust, it would be a good idea to create the trust first.
Yeah, to create it.
Yeah.
It sounded to me like they had the trust, but they didn't put the money into it.
No, they never established the trust. So all they had done is actually transferred the money to the attorney's trust account.
But that brings up another...
And the court said that's not good enough.
Okay, but that brings up another point, mate. We create legal documents, but if we don't keep those documents up to date, if we don't fully understand what we created, we in fact have not helped ourselves.
Correct. I get people all the time who come in and they have no idea what's in their documents. No idea. No comprehension of what they've done in the past or anything. And, a lot of times it's just a matter of picking them up and reading them. But for some reason, some people can't seem to do that. But in general, you should review your legal documents every 5 years.
How about when you get older? You should probably do it more often.
Well, yeah, and also, you should review your documents if there's been major life events. Yeah. Deaths, marriages, divorces, that kind of thing.
Okay, we're at break time, folks. But on the other side of the break, we got some specific things we want to talk about on Social Security. What's happening with the returns to the hospital if you don't pay attention, how you could be really seriously financially impacted by that. And these are legal things, and you need to pay attention to them. So stay with us. We'll be back with you in about 3 minutes.
American Warrior Radio, Saturdays at 11 a.m. on AM 1060 WMEL.
This is Joe Steckler, folks. We're live with the second half of Helping Seniors, the radio arm of Helping Seniors of Brevard County. Remember, we have a whole slew of printed media stuff out there in Hometown News, Ebony News Today, Al Dia, the Spanish paper, Spotlight Magazine, Senior Scene Magazine. We have 18 shows a week on Space Coast Government Channel, the Bright House. And we have this radio show now in its 16th year. We talk about seniors, senior things, senior issues, how seniors can be helped. And we're getting ready at the end of the month to kick off our second year of the Senior Advocacy Council. Our thrust this year is going to be to do the very best we can to make the Space Coast Government Channel an elder-friendly channel. And to that extent, I just finished the second part of a 3-part article on what elder-friendly communities really mean to a community. What are elder-friendly communities? We can't go out and change the world, but we can do a better job, Bill, of informing people, educating people, and connecting them with resources.
Hear, hear.
I really, really believe that. So let me just mention quickly our sponsors for the second part of the show before Bill and I get started here. Senior Scene Magazine, Hometown News, Spotlight Magazine, Seniors Helping Seniors, The Fountains of Melbourne, Courtney Braswell Financial Team, Barbara McIntyre Home Equity Specialist, Canadian Meds of Melbourne, Ear Care with 3 locations, Vitas Hospice, Handy Pro, the Space Coast, and Al Dia Today. And folks, let me just mention real quick that Canadian Meds of Melbourne, Joe Pons, the owner of that business, says, I had him on a recent TV show, and I was simply amazed. He had one medication that was doctors used to inject into a knee, and the injection cost $1,100 in the U.S. By buying that product through Canada, he got it for $178, the exact same product, Bill. So the company that made it was still making a profit. Joe Pons is making a profit. And the people themselves are saving $900+ on every time they use a syringe.
Crazy.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I It's sickening, actually.
Yes, it is. And it goes right back to how hard can we really push on government to do a better job of informing the general public about what we do. And here I'm speaking very specifically in terms of care dollars. You're an elder law attorney. You get out and you do all these seminars and you tell people ways they can do and build an estate plan. You tell them the documents they need. You show them how they can help themselves. Yet at the same time, a government official, somebody, a civilian in the government hierarchy someplace, can do more to thwart all the good that you're doing. What is that?
Well, one thing would be to allow Medicare to negotiate with these drug companies. That certainly would help. We have a prohibition against Medicare negotiating rates for drugs.
They can't negotiate a rate?
No.
Well, that kind of goes along with the fact that
VA can. That's why all the veterans use the VA. They get their drugs from the VA. VA negotiates with the pharmaceutical companies. But Medicare is prohibited from doing that.
Okay, I'll give you a good example. I take a drug called Lyrica. I can't get it locally, but that drug I get from the VA center, or what they call the script center out of Denver, and that's run by the VA, and that's, my copay is $40-some a month, and if I had to purchase that drug on the open market, it'd be $1,000 a month.
Yeah, it's crazy.
$1,100.
Yep.
So
makes you wonder where they come up with those prices, because you probably, if you went across the border into Canada, it'd probably be a lot cheaper.
So if people took nothing away from today's show except the fact there's a company called Canadian Meds, you can get the phone number by calling Kay at the office at 473-7770, and they might save themselves a fortune over a year's period of time. If they took nothing away from today's radio show with that, we've gained something. We've helped somebody.
It's, it hasn't got any better, folks. We were hearing all those stories about people driving to Canada to get their prescriptions filled, and nothing's changed.
But you can do it right here without driving anyplace.
Right.
And it's delivered to you at your house. And a number of people, I've had people ask me about, well, how safe is it to buy those drugs through an outfit like this? It's safe because they have their own pharmacist. They don't use anything unless it's made in the U.S. And that's another thing that more people. You and I, in the first part of the show, Bill, we talked about people not having information. Did you know, listeners, that one of the most widely used prescription drugs in the United States is insulin? The makers of U.S. insulin have got the system tied up so that these drug companies that sell drugs at a lesser cost cannot buy American-made insulin and resell it at a lower cost. They will not let them do that. It keeps the price high. This is what, Bill, you and I get so darn frustrated. It's just like you're a lawyer, and I've watched you work with the people about establishing a trust. Mm-hmm. And you ask them very basic questions. And building an estate plan is not a difficult thing to do. It's actually pretty simple, very simple. What it amounts to is finding the right attorney and letting the attorney ask you questions and you answering the questions honestly. What happens if they don't answer the questions honestly? Then
the plan won't work as accordingly.
Do you find people who do that?
Yeah, we find people reluctant to share what the assets in their estate are, and usually we tell them we can't help them then.
Well, as we move forward into tax time, and right now, what are some of the biggest problems you and Melanie and Sandy And who's the guy that does your Medicaid stuff? What's his name?
Martin.
Martin. What are some of the biggest problems that you all encounter that listeners should be aware of?
Well, we're not accountants, so tax time to us is just another day. That for us, we don't typically have a lot of people that come running to us about issues with taxes, so it's not a big day for us.
I know that, but if people build an estate plan and they don't follow the tax rules, if they don't do the things they should do on time, that could severely and adversely hamper an estate plan from developing, can it?
Well, in Florida, we don't have any estate tax and we don't have any inheritance tax. So the only time your estate becomes taxable is if you exceed the federal exemption amount, which is $5.43 million, which just about covers everybody I talk to.
Okay.
So, most people do not have estate tax issues that I see.
One thing that keeps popping up on the internet, it keeps popping up on some of the warnings I get on my internet screen. It has to do with certain scams that come out at this time of year, and probably we get the Ponzi schemes during the year that people get whacked into. And you know what I did? I did this. I wanted to see how much that Publishers Clearinghouse would inundate me with stuff if I said I was interested. And like I wasn't, I did it intentionally, and I subscribed to that thing. I'm going to tell you, there's not a day that goes by they don't try to swamp me into buying stuff.
Right.
So, folks, I did it as a test. I'm telling you, as a friend, be careful of the buttons you push on that computer, because you can sure get yourself into trouble.
Oh, yes, very much so. You can get yourself inundated with offers to buy all kinds of stuff you don't need.
That comes. Do you ever, as an law attorney, do you get people that come to you that have got extreme credit card debts that are trying to figure out how to get off underneath that? Does that ever happen? Yeah,
occasionally that does, because we're usually in the course of sometimes doing a Medicaid planning for somebody, we find out that, when they learn that their income is going to go to the nursing home and then the state pays the difference, that doesn't leave any income left over to pay credit card bills. And so a lot of times those bills go unpaid.
Okay. As an elder law attorney, one of the biggest things that you've been involved with, and you've been personally involved with, and this has to do with the care of dementia patients. The Senate has got a new, I learned on your Elder Law Attorney Network that the Senate has got a new initiative out now where they've gone out again to try to pour more money into curing Alzheimer's disease. And now they've set 2025 as a target date to have something significant to report. I've been watching these reports now for 27 years, and I have seen really no progress. I wonder when we're going to maybe accept the fact that there's some things that happen to us as a process of life that we're not going to reverse. We're not reversing the aging process. Ponce de Leon didn't find that fountain, and we do die. I think, Bill, that we need to do a better job of developing ways to help families work their way through these crises.
I would agree with that. I saw a show that was, I didn't watch the whole show, but there was a show where, they started off talking about how if, you had to have the government pay for the care involved with Alzheimer's, you'd bankrupt the healthcare system. That was, I guess, one of their propositions, just because of the amount and the nature and of the care and how many people now are coming down with this disease. You know, the sheer volume of people going through the system now.
With Alzheimer's?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's projected by 2025 to have tripled to something like, I want to say 80 million people over the age of 85. And that's horrendous worldwide.
Correct.
So I had a statistic. I was looking for it here, and I found it, but it said that Medicaid spending on long-term care was $146 billion in fiscal 2013, including nearly $89 billion just for seniors. That's U.S.-wide.
Okay.
And you think about $146 billion U.S.-wide, and the preponderance of that money is spent in Florida, Texas, New York, and California.
Where the seniors are.
Seniors are.
Yes.
And so that puts a big burden on the state. And forget whether we're a Democrat or a Republican for a minute. Think we're just a citizen. And the act of the Florida legislature and the governor did not accept the Medicaid offer to help under the Affordable Care Act. I don't understand. I don't understand why the legislature said that we don't want to do it because we don't want to add another entitlement program. You know, it's not. It is entitlement, but it's not. It's a fact of life. We are living longer. We've got to find ways to pay for it.
Well, I don't think there's any good reason not to expand Medicaid. I think it's just, become a political football in the state, and they're not going to do that based on some sort of principle they may have, even if it hurts people's lives.
I agree. But the other thing is that we talked about this before, and there's not much time, and that's the raising the Social Security retirement age on April 29th. Is there anything at this point anybody could do about that?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, it's sort of a ipso facto done deal. We'll forget about that. Now, I pulled one thing off the network, and as much as you and I talk about, I like the heading. Mm-hmm. The scary cost challenge of paying for long-term care. The scary cost challenge. That's everything I have read on a National Association of Elder Law Attorney stuff talks about that said here the spending on long-term care for seniors by the federal government, states, families, and individuals for those 65 and older will increase from 1.3% of the gross domestic product in 2010 to 3% of the GDP in 2050. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but as a guy that prepares estate plans and tries to figure out how people can pay for what they're going to be able to afford, those are big numbers.
Yes, they are.
That's an tree. What do you think? I never ask you your opinion, Bill, on what do you think about? What do you think we should really do or could be done?
Well, I think we're moving somewhat in the right direction, but at the same time, you have this big push nationally and statewide, at least, not to pay any more taxes to support any of these programs. So where do you get the balance between, what we're willing to pay for and what we're willing to accept?
Yeah.
Where is that balance? And obviously the system's going to be severely stressed here as the growing number, as we have a growing number of seniors. And, quite frankly, a lot, the over 85 population is going to grow immensely. So we're going to have needs for these services that are going to be significant. And where do you come up with the money to pay for these services? Or are we just going to let people, die in the streets?
I thought you're leading into something. We've got not much time left, but one big thing that they had on the Attorney Network was talk about the fact that the doctors and some of the experts disagree on vision care tests for seniors, and they don't want Medicare to pay for that. But at the same time, they sort of wised up and realized that the primary care doctor needs to be more involved with end-of-life decision planning. So now they're paying, Medicare will pay for doctors, for families to consult with a doctor about the need for hospice care.
Right.
So you tie that in with the fact that under the Affordable Care Act, if we don't do a better job of keeping people out of hospitals, that we're going to charge the hospitals and make the hospitals pay penalty fees if they discharge people too
early.
So
without proper discharge planning.
Yeah. So how in the thunder? How do you reconcile all this stuff? It's just like we're doing one thing to cause a problem, yet we're doing something else to try to fix something at a cost to something else. And, I get after the show, Kay will get a lot of calls over to the office and say, why were they talking about her? What did they mean? What did Bill and Joe mean when they were talking about this? It's interesting the questions that we generate, Bill.
Well, the big question is, why are we paying, as a nation, the United States is the number one payer, pays the most for health care per person in the world. And guess where we rank as far as the delivery of services?
You got me.
32nd. And we keep falling lower and lower. So the question really is, why are we paying for so much and not getting or receiving little in return? Where is all this money going?
Do you ever explain this stuff in your seminars?
I don't, because my seminars are really to help people with their problems, not try and talk about national problems. But we're the number one payer per capita for health care, and we're 32nd as far as services go. Yeah, so why is everybody else doing such a better job of it than the United States?
But everything I read, it doesn't.
Why does that medicine cost $900 less in Canada than it does in the United States?
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting taken to the cleaners is the bottom line.
By major corporations. So maybe Mr. Trump needs to get elected president.
Oh, I'm not going to go there, Joe.
I say that to generate.
You'll probably get some phone calls at the office on that one.
No, seriously. We do need to take a hard look, Bill, at everything we're doing, especially here at the state level. You and I talk about it, and we joke about it sometimes on the show, but what appear to be very small decisions made by the legislature and the Senate in the state of Florida have a great, great impact on the lives of thousands and thousands of people.
Yes.
Last comment.
Well, if you don't think this is on people's minds, you saw what happened to the governor the other day in Gainesville, didn't you? Oh, he made a little stop there in Gainesville, and somebody came up and started screaming at him about Medicaid expansion. So,
oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, folks, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, folks. I'm not sure who my panelists will be, but we'll have a show. We'll be here with you next week. Oh, it's Dr. Sheldon. Dr. Sheldon.